Our next speaker is Vijay Chakravarti, and he is a multidisciplinary designer at Philips with a focus on designing meaningful and engaging product and service experiences. And in this talk, he's going to be looking at the intersection of meaning and growth, but particularly from the perspective of building intentionality into design. And he'll be proposing a framework and some tangible aspects on how we can do that. So I would like to introduce to Vijay. Give him a virtual hand.
Well, hello everybody. I'm going to share my screen. Well, great. So hello from Seattle. My name is Vijay. I work with the Oral Healthcare Division of Philips, and I'm the practice lead for service design at this division. I'm here to talk about making growth meaningful, right? And a framework to make that happen. Now, we all aspire for growth, right? Everyone that I know wants to live a meaningful life. We try our best to derive meaning out of our work, out of our relationships, our beliefs, and so on. For me, I began my career as an industrial designer, and over the last 16 years, I've had the chance to dabble into organizational design, to services and ecosystems. But wanting to do something meaningful has been a constant pursuit. Now, the thing is, when we think of the terms growth and meaning, we often hear or think that they are mutually exclusive. Right? That if you are really after meaning, the path is different from the path of growth. So this framework brings the two common desires together and considers the common collective desire for meaningful growth. Now, what does meaningful entail in the context of growth? Right? So there are three aspects to meaningful growth, and consider these three as big buckets of topics. So first, culture, right? So culture, and we've spoken about this a lot in the other talks, right? It's reflected in so many ways, right? From how we celebrate to how we carry out our daily activities, both at work and leisure, right? It is about our everyday moments. So how we choose to spend our time makes a statement about how we live today, right? So it's a mix of the choices that are available to us, the stories that spark our aspirations, and certain norms, both individual and collective ones that define how we do things. Now, all of us aspire to live better and improve our way of life, the quality of life we lead, and the nature of interactions that people around us have, right? That we have with the people around us. So next, knowledge. We humans are highly inquisitive and curious. We seek knowledge, and that has paid off in how we have built our civilizations. Right? And knowledge is the information or the technology that we have at hand. For example, thousands of years ago, the discovery of fire changed how we cook. And today, advances in science, engineering, and electronics are shaping how we live and work. Right? So we humans, collectively, we know so much. Our knowledge spans psychology to economics, physics, and so on. So culture, knowledge, and wealth. Well, this doesn't need a lot of introduction. And in order to achieve the previous two, a certain amount of money is really required. It's really the perceived value of things. It is a system of trust. Like if you consider the US dollar, right, the raw material by itself is really not all that valuable. But if the signature on the back is that of the treasurer of the Federal Reserve, that offers it a lot of legitimacy, right? So this holds good whether you're talking about the stock market or the value of your real estate, right? So revenue and profitability considerations drive our work. You know, and all of us are aware of that. It's called the bottom line often, right? So culture, knowledge, and wealth, right? And this applies to individuals, organizations, and societies. So the three aspects are also highly interconnected, right? Knowledge affects wealth. So organizations, for example, that spend the most on research and development are the most well-to-do companies in the world today. and similarly, culture affects knowledge. With computers becoming a part of how we live, there's a lot more funding for software development and obviously more demand eventually for education and software engineering, right? So the three are highly interconnected. And if you design for culture, knowledge, and wealth, you've got meaningful growth. But now you must be thinking, well, okay, genius, if it's that simple, why is it not happening? Well, we as humans are very knowledgeable. In general, we are wealthier than in the past too. So what's stopping us? So if we ask ourselves, while these three, culture, knowledge, and wealth, are important, which of these should be in the driver's seat of growth? What's interesting is that wealth is created when knowledge or new knowledge is adopted into culture, right? A new technology by itself does not make money. It requires customers to want it, to spend on it. So now you tell me what's really the bottom line, right? So, and that's culture. And culture is the forte of design, the role of crafting and converting new technology into being something that's more human-centered is what designers do, right? Design, yes, design is good for business, right? Everything's been argued to be good for business these days, but design is good for business only because design can influence culture, right? Now consider the impact of Bauhaus. This design school ran from 1919 to 1933, but its impact is still felt today, right? They stood for modernism. Until today, it sets the tone for how we aspire to live and the kind of products we want to own. Now, fun fact, this font called Futura was developed when the Bauhaus was at its peak. And that was the font of choice for the plaque on the moon that was left by the Apollo 11 mission, right? Now consider this. This font Futura influenced the development of Helvetica. Sounds familiar? And it is still the font of choice for so many of us. And it was developed in the 1950s. Right? So the key takeaway is that design has always had a deep connection and influence on culture. And iconic designers were very intentional in the change they wanted to see. So as designers, we need to be consciously designing intentions going forward. We need to be very deliberate in our goals for influencing culture, knowledge, and wealth. In order to do so, we need to amend the role of design a little bit, right? So one of the important abilities of designers is how we frame our challenges and to reframe them in the terms that make sense, right? So, and that's how we connect the dots to show a desirable future, right? So designers, please do not shy away from taking up the mantle of being the curators of culture, right? And the role of design is to facilitate, change. Now, what's interesting is that we as a society, as practitioners, we've become very good at framing our aspirations when it comes to wealth, right? So very clear profit and revenue targets. And on the topic of knowledge as well, we are getting better, right? Organizations have a data strategy or a tech acquisition strategy, but culture, on the other hand, has not always had that kind of framing, right? The problems, of course, of today are bigger than what one set of experts can solve. One set of experts can solve. So hence we need better collaboration, right, with functions within our organization to make this happen. And one of the biggest challenges of today is that of directed collaboration, right? We are packs of various experts that can connect and come together, but what happens after that, right? So with that in mind, here's a framework that can be used to direct teams towards the path of meaningful growth. It is meant to be used by designers, technologists, or subject matter experts of various kinds. And the role of the designer here is to facilitate the use of these tools. Let's do a quick overview of the framework. So this is most relevant in fairly early stages of strategic projects, right? Before you put together a complete project brief, but at the same time, when you have done some research and synthesis and you're doing some strategic ideation. And it's kind of valid whether you're doing consulting work or whether or if you're in a corporation, right? So the first set of tools, there's a sequence of tools, and the first set of tools called the intention proposition help you collaborate within your domain first, and to get ready for collaboration a little later. So to illustrate this, I will take an example, a highly simplified version of an example. For example, coffee is such a big part of our life. So let's say we take the case of a certain large coffee company, and a lot of projects, of course, begin with wanting better revenues, right, through more sales or more data. So if you remember, we identified that we need to be designing and framing our intentions carefully. This is the part where we get to clarifying what our intentions are. So every worksheet has two major pieces to it, right? So there is the current state and the future state, where you're ideating to say what your intention is. In the case of culture, for example, it is about how you're changing the culture relevant to your topic, your project, right? Changing the way specific things are done. And so there are prompts here that help you fill up this worksheet, right? So for example, there are aspects of behaviors you understand in the current state, and certain aspirations that you have. And then in the intended state, you kind of figure out what are things you want to celebrate or encourage, right? And there are things you want to keep from how things are being done. What are things you want to stop or change from what you know? And what are some new behaviors, new ways of doing things that you want to introduce? Now, this worksheet, considering, for service designers, it is important to consider both the front stage and the backstage, right? This helps you fill up this worksheet from the perspective of the internal organization as well. And you want to see the culture that you want to be implementing within the organization as well. So going back to our example, in the current state, we know that coffee keeps people sharp and makes them take a walk when they get coffee. It's a good break, However, the issue might be that people dispose of these takeaway cups that go into landfill. So in the intended state, we want to celebrate the coffee culture, change the behavior around the use of disposable cups, while introducing, let's say, a service around reusable cups, right? So let's say the ideation leads to a collection system for reusable cups. And next, right, so we've done culture. Next, the team needs to sit down with subject matter experts to understand the current and intended state for the knowledge or the know-how that will be impacted by this. So again, a couple of prompts that help you there. I'm going to breeze through this. And for example, going back to, in the current state, with the knowledge, with the coffee company, for instance, the ability is to bring out a specific flavor or taste from the coffee seeds. And perhaps there's an app with the digital team with certain capabilities. And in the intended state, we now need to tag the need for developing the logistics around a collection system, right? For example, technology to track the journey of the cup through the given neighborhood. And also the need to design and source these reusable cup with RFID, for instance. So we've done culture, knowledge. Next is the wealth worksheet, right? A similar worksheet here where you tag current and future state. And there are prompts here that help you fill up things from the perspective of users and internally, right? The backstage. So then you sit down with the people in business and figure out the sizing of the market, the willingness to pay, budgets, pricing, and so on. And then you proceed through the sequence, right? So you've done your intention proposition. You're getting into what's called as the intention matrix, right? This is where you sit down and collaborate with, the various experts that have worked on this with you so far. And the key to good workshops is a lot of preparation and planning. And I think they work best when both the facilitators and the participants have come prepared to share points of view and have some deep work that is done beforehand, right? So important. So here, the point is that these pre-developed intention propositions from step one will inform the workshop, right? So, and this matrix helps you cross-map the aspects that you've decided from a culture point of view, and for instance, and see how that influences the knowledge, and respectively what's happening from a wealth perspective, right? It considers the impact of these prior worksheets and from both the organization and the society. right? So it helps the team to brainstorm, how you can create value from culture and what's being decided from a technological standpoint. How does that impact culture and the conversations you can have to influence a specific technology based on the culture needs and revenue needs and so on, right? And so going back to our coffee example, the team has decided to go for a more eco-conscious version of coffee consumption combined with a reusable cup collection system, let's say. So from a knowledge standpoint, the organization is looking into revenues that are not just coming from people walking into stores, right? So, but also from people that love the convenience of this eco service combined with all the insights and the data that this generates, right? So, such as consumption of flavor patterns by location and so on. Right? What's missing is the supply chain for the ceramic reusable coffee cups that have RFID, for instance, right? Now, Seattle has a lot of local ceramic makers. So what if this can be solved by making local partnerships with small businesses? Now, combining local art and technology to provide flavorful coffee from a societal standpoint, that would empower local businesses to have a better revenue model, right? So it's so much faster to sometimes partner and grow rather than build new capabilities ground up. So from a wealth standpoint, you're building greater ties with your customer while attracting a growing group of eco-conscious customers and ones that appreciate local art too. So this cross-mapping, I mean, this is a simplified example, of course, but this cross-mapping of the influence of culture, knowledge, and wealth leads to more impactful version of your intentions, right? It's a discussion tool, really. And this is super important part of the system because it brings together the three concepts. It challenges the experts in the room to find interesting, intersecting, connected value streams involving culture, knowledge, and wealth, right? It pushes each domain within organizations to influence each other in a very conscious manner. And now, there's also an extended map for depending on how savvy you are to figure out not only how this maps to organizations and societies, but also to individuals and the environment. Right? Too often today, right, we design for individuals and forget the impact it has when seen from the perspective of the collective. Right? So we design for business sometimes and not always design for the environment. So this helps you consider all of these. Now, often the decision makers are rarely able to spend time in these long workshops, but their input is so important and their buy-in is so necessary for projects to stay afloat. So this aid, this intention blueprint, helps you with storytelling and decision making, right? So this is a blueprint, it's a medium to lay out the current state, the intended state, and why of the time or the resources that the team needs to get to the next state. Right? So blueprints are handy decision-making tools that help the team to tell the story of where they are versus where we are versus where we want to be. Right? So the intention blueprint helps you walk stakeholders through the current state and the intended state, both from the perspective of your customers and the backstage or the internal perspective. Right? It helps innovation teams drive the conversation of the changes that need to happen and the investments that are required in order to do so. So to recap, the tools shown, the first set of tools is called the intention proposition. It helps you collaborate within your domains to frame the culture, knowledge, and wealth intentions. The next tool, the intention matrix, supports collaboration among different domains to come together. And the third tool, the blueprint, is a decision-making tool and a storytelling tool for the whole team to go back and get buy-in from executives. Now, this sequence is complete when you're able to drive the decision towards project briefs, where each competency can now run with a certain project direction that has considered aspects of meaningful growth. Right? So this is, of course, a very quick overview. So there you have it, a framework for meaningful growth. Right? It has been tested in multiple projects since 2018, and the results have been promising. I hope to share some successful case studies next year, but the underlying intention here is to find ways to drive aspirations into collaboration and strategy. Okay? And so looking back, do we think that growth and meaning are still mutually exclusive? And more important, considering all that we've discussed so far with all the speakers and all that we know that's happening around us, can we really afford to keep them mutually exclusive? So big questions for us. And the key focus of this framework is to make the case for an intentional focus on culture as we develop new products and services. And we need to be in the driver's seat of culture change rather than technology or a passion for wealth drives us into unintended directions, right? And so I say the need for the hour is balance, a balanced approach that caters to the needs of the individual and the society, businesses and the environment. Okay? So we designers are poised to be the change makers, and this is really a call to embrace a conscious approach towards bringing about positive change. And so collectively, we shape the story of humanity. We need to learn to influence how our teams make or present certain choices, both to internally to ourselves and to our customers. So within this, I believe that we each have the power to drive everyone towards a more meaningful version of growth. If you are interested in the framework, please message me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'll be happy to share this framework with you and how it works. Right? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Vijay. I can't tell if the camera's back on me, but thank you for that. That's actually pretty exciting. I'll definitely be reaching out for that framework and excited to try it out.